to my first ever YouTube video. That sounds pretty weird to say. Hopefully I get used to this chatting to the camera as the video goes on. So my name is Steph, for pretty much everyone watching this that has no idea who I am. I gave birth to our first baby, little Luca, back in December of 2019. And from there I created an Instagram page called Mama Got Back. If I can kind of be a little bit tech savvy and figure out how to put it on the screen, I'll put it somewhere here if you're interested in following that. And basically that is me documenting my health and fitness journey, kind of postpartum, getting your body back sort of thing. Post a lot of workouts and recipes and things like that. And I guess that sort of is what has led me to filming this video today. A lot of questions I get asked are around my birth story, and I guess people are just curious to know what happened. I have briefly touched on the fact that it was pretty traumatic, so I guess people may be curious, and also these are some of my favorite videos to watch on YouTube, is just hearing people's different experiences and what they've been through. And also, when if I get puffed out, I'm pregnant and it's hard to keep talking. But yeah, when I was really going through some of the hardest times, you know, when I was in hospital and I was literally scrolling through YouTube, you know, trying to watch people's videos and just trying to connect with someone who had a similar experience to me. And unfortunately I didn't find anyone that had the exact same story as me, but it was still really good to get, you know, people's experiences. If me telling my story can help someone who may be having a rough time, then that's all I can ask for. And you know, if you are someone who has experienced this or is experiencing something like this, I would love to hear from you, because I think, you know, I am very fortunate. I had the best family and friends who were with me, you know, every single day in hospital when things were getting hard. But to have that kind of connection with someone who's experienced the same thing and can actually understand how it feels to go through what you've been through, I think is pretty important. So yeah, I would love to hear from you. It's also taken me a long time to build up the courage to actually film this video. I contemplated filming this, if you're from Australia or Victoria, in our very first lockdown. So that was March last year, so almost 2 years ago. I am glad that I've waited this long, because I think I'm finally ready to say it and we'll be able to get through it without getting too emotional, fingers crossed, because for a long time, like I couldn't even talk about it, I would just cry. That's why, you know, almost 2 years later, here we are. And a few trigger warnings before we get into it. If you're currently pregnant, I would probably suggest not watching this video. I think it's hard enough being pregnant and trying not to let every little thing stress you out as it is, and I don't want hearing my experience to negatively impact how you feel in your pregnancy, and I don't want you to sit there and think this is going to happen to you, because honestly what happened to me was a 1 in a million thing, unfortunately. And yeah, and the other thing is, if you're someone who can't deal with people talking about blood or all the gross stuff, probably not the video for you. I totally get it, no hard feelings. It is sort of horrible to hear, and you know, if you can't listen to it or you don't want to hear it, totally fine, definitely understand. Just wanted to put that warning out there. So it's kind of a lengthy story, so get comfy, maybe grab a tea, coffee, some snacks. Let's get into it. Okay, so for the most part, my pregnancy was pretty straightforward, pretty low risk. There was a bit of a scare at the start. I was very early on. I think I would have been about 7 weeks maybe. And I was at work, and the only person who knew that I was pregnant was my manager. Oh, Luca's waking up. Pause. Yeah, the only person who knew I was pregnant was my manager, and I remember I was sitting at my desk and like if you're a woman, you will understand this feeling. I just felt sort of like this gush, I guess you could say, and instantly my heart just dropped, and I got up and went straight to the bathroom, and there was so much blood, and you know, I just broke down, and I just thought in my head, like I thought I was gonna get through that crying. I haven't even got to the worst part yet. And I just thought, you know, like I've lost him, because there was just that much blood that I just couldn't see how that could be possible. So I went up to my manager, and like I didn't even really have to say much. It was like she just knew what I was about to say. I called my husband, like in hysterics, just crying. So he left work straight away, and I also called my mum because she lived quite close to my work as well. And then my mum called my doctor, and the doctor kind of said, there's not really much I can do, you need to go straight to emergency. So we went there, and the wait was horrible because you don't, you know, there's no way of knowing what's going on. And this was sort of my first bad experience with this hospital. You know, I get people have to wait, and you know, they can only do so much, but I was pretty much told, if you're miscarrying, there's nothing we can do about it. We can book you a outpatient appointment in a couple of days time. And they were literally going to leave it at that, and I was going to have to go home and not know whether my baby was alive, basically. So I was hysterical, and I think the doctor sort of felt a bit bad for me, and he ended up getting someone to come and do an ultrasound. And I mean, I don't know why they didn't just do that in the first place, because it honestly took them 2 seconds. This lady wheeled in ultrasound machine. As soon as she put it on my stomach, we saw him. There was a heartbeat straight away, and I just like broke down even more, but I was just so happy. And you know, because we were obviously thinking the worst, and it was just the best thing to hear his little heartbeat. So a couple of weeks after the hospital, I was still having a few episodes of some bleeding, and I ended up just booking in my own ultrasound just for some peace of mind, just to make sure everything was okay. Thankfully, everything was looking fine. Baby was healthy. When we got the report back from that ultrasound, it had said that they thought it may have been the demise of a twin who hadn't survived. And that was obviously, you know, really crazy for us to hear, because there was no mention of twins or anything like when we found out we were pregnant. And I was pretty annoyed because no one seemed to take it seriously. And when I spoke to my doctor, she just kind of laughed it off and was like, that's ridiculous. But not realizing, like, from our perspective, like to this day, I still think about that. And it may have just been someone's opinion, but it doesn't sit well with me to not know if my son was supposed to be a twin, and if I should have mourned a loss of a child. Like, and you know, I have no answers, and I'll never know, and I'll probably think about it every day for the rest of my life. So that was our first sort of problem early on in my pregnancy. After that, everything was fine. So it got to, I was 36 weeks and a few days. It was a Thursday night, and the next day was actually supposed to be my last day at work. And it was the middle of the night. I was asleep. I was laying in bed. Obviously, I'm asleep. And I just felt like this fluid. And a lot of weird and wonderful things happen when you're pregnant, so I didn't really think much of it. I got up and went to the bathroom, and just this liquid just went everywhere, and I was just in shock. And my husband comes running in, and he goes, did your waters just break? And I'm like, I think so. And he goes, does that mean that he's coming? And I'm like, I think so. And we were both just in shock, because we obviously didn't expect him to be coming so early. And we're kind of running around like crazy. We're on the phone to the hospital. I had roughly packed our hospital stuff, but not quite, so it's like 2 a.m. and I'm trying to quickly pack our suitcases. The hospital told us to wait a couple hours, just monitor how much fluid I was losing, give them a call back. We did that, and they told us to come in. So we went into the hospital. They confirmed it was my waters that had broke, and they pretty much said, we're going to keep you in hospital until you give birth. Because I wasn't really going into labour on my own, and I guess they just have to monitor you and whatnot. Because it was quite early, they wanted to wait till I was 37 weeks. It's classified as like full term. So Luca wasn't a prem baby and didn't have to go into the nursery. So they waited until, I think it was a Saturday in the afternoon, and they induced me. And before that, I was like having some sort of contractions, but they were pretty manageable, a little bit painful, but I could get through them. As soon as they induced me, the worst pain of my entire life. And then they had put sort of something that they could monitor his heart rate from outside the room. So we had our privacy, and there was my midwife who was making sure his heart rate was okay. And I remember laying in bed trying to get comfortable, and then all of a sudden my room was just filled with all these people. There was midwives and doctors, and they came in a rush and said, you know, his heart rate has really dropped. And they kind of turned, like pushing me and like trying to get me into different positions to help him calm down. And eventually we found a position that he must have liked, because his heart rate went back up and it was normal. So then everyone left the room. And then it wouldn't have been much longer after that. The same thing happened. Everyone came rushing in, and the doctor said, I'm just going to call it, we're going to have an emergency cesarean. I didn't go into that birth with much of a plan, because I kind of, like, I understood, you know, not everything happens the way you want it to. The only thing I really wanted was a natural birth, and like hearing that, you know, getting rushed to theatre because something's wrong was really scary. But like all our family was there, my husband was by my side, so you know, you have to do what's best for your baby. So I got taken into theatre. Yeah, I literally remember everything. I remember being wheeled into the room. I remember what it felt like. I was really sick from all the medication that they had been giving me. And you know, it's funny, because before we went to the hospital, I was in the bathroom. My husband walks in and he goes, what are you doing? And I'm like sitting there curling my hair. And I was like, you know, you want to look nice for your photos when your baby's born. And he's like, you're crazy. And here I am laying in theatre about to have a cesarean, feeling so sick from all this medication that I just vomited all over myself. And I've got like doctors trying to wipe my face, and I just looked terrible. Yeah, so I'm in theatre, and I remember, you know, just kind of looking at my husband, because they put that sheet in front of you and you don't know really what's going on. And I was just waiting for that moment, like to hear his cry, and I just thought, you know, once you hear that, everything's okay. And I did, and it was the best feeling in the world. And they passed him over to us, and we're both just so emotional. It was just, you know, the best experience of our entire lives. So a few hours after he was born, I hemorrhaged, and I lost about 2 liters of blood kind of over a period of time. And I had a midwife and doctor who would come in and check every now and then, and they would take like that sheet that they, whatever it's called, that they put on your bed, and they would go and weigh it to kind of give an estimate of how much blood I was losing. And I had a doctor come in, and he said once it gets to a certain amount, and I think it was about 1.5 liters or something, he goes, then we have to go back into theatre and try and stop the bleeding, basically. So, and it's really hard because your body is doing this, but you have no control over it. And I obviously didn't want to go back into theatre. Like before this, I'd never been in a hospital in my life. I was so scared. And you know, you don't want your body to be doing what it's doing, but you literally, there's nothing you can do about it. So I obviously reached that 1.5 liter mark, went past it, and the doctor said we have to go back into theatre. So I went back into theatre the same day Luca was born, and they did whatever they needed to do to try and stop the bleeding. I came out of theatre and they said it all went well. I had 2 blood transfusions and an iron transfusion, and you know, obviously you losing a lot of blood, you're feeling pretty average. I couldn't really stand up or, you know, do anything. I had no energy, and I think I was in hospital for about a week, and then I was discharged. So after I was discharged from the hospital, it would have been a few weeks after Luca was born. One night, I think it was about midnight, 1 a.m, I had a bottle ready on the side of the bed because I knew he was going to wake up to feed. I had Luca in a bassinet next to the bed, and I felt like the same feeling as when my waters broke, and I just like, you know, what is going on? And I got up and I went to the bathroom, and there was blood literally just going everywhere, all over the floor, all through my clothes. And I pulled everything down and there was like clots, like, I'm not kidding, like the size of my hand. And my husband comes running in, and the look on his face, like, I just knew it was really bad. And I didn't know what to do, so I sat on the toilet, like, obviously to prevent the blood from going everywhere, and it just wouldn't stop. And my husband was on the phone to the ambulance, and I started to feel really, really faint. My ears started to ring. I felt like my eyes were closing, and like, I don't want to sound dramatic, but in that moment I literally thought I was gonna die. I thought that was the end. And I just remember thinking like about Luca, who was literally in the room behind me, and I just thought to myself, he's not gonna know who I am. He's not gonna remember me. He's not gonna know, you know, how much I love him. Sorry. And then the ambulance said to my husband, take her off the toilet and lay her on the floor. That should help stop the bleeding. And by this point I was just completely out of it. There was still clots and blood just going everywhere. And luckily the ambulance got there really quickly, and they took me back to the hospital where I had him. And honestly, the way I was treated was just horrible. Like, I came in an ambulance. I didn't see a doctor, I think, for about 7 hours. My whole body was covered in blood. I had like a bra top on. I wasn't dressed. And they just said, you know, they were busy and they'll get to it when they get to it. And when the doctor ended up coming in, he said he had spoken with obstetrics and they advised that this was normal, apparently, after what had happened to me when I gave birth and losing blood. And basically was just sent home. No one cleaned me up. They let me walk out covered in blood, and just said it was a normal thing. So I was obviously feeling pretty average. I had lost a lot of blood, and I was still bleeding quite heavily, and I just knew, like, you know your body and you know when something's wrong, and I had that feeling. So I went to my GP and I said, I need a referral for an ultrasound because something isn't right. I mean, she didn't really take me seriously either, and she said to me, you know, it's impossible after a cesarean for anything to have been left inside your uterus. She goes, but I'll give it to you for your own peace of mind. So I went and did this ultrasound, and the technician, you know, was looking through everything, and she said, you need to go to hospital right now. And I said, why? What's happened? And she said, they've left, there's something in there. And she goes, you know, it's pretty significant, it's pretty large. You know, you could be getting really sick. So they sent the results to my GP straight away. I went to see her. She called the hospital. I think she was just embarrassed because she didn't take me seriously either. And, you know, had a bit of a word with the hospital. They organised a room for me and I went back into hospital. And this was probably a month after he was born, maybe. So I was back in this lovely hospital, and I had all these doctors coming to talk to me, and they wanted to do an MRI, and they said, you know, that'll give them a better understanding of what's happening. And they explained the worst scenario to me, but they kind of said it in a way like, don't even stress about it because that's not going to be what it is. They just said, you know, more for precaution sort of thing. So I had the MRI and we're waiting for the results, and the doctor walks in, and I had my family there with me, and she asked to talk to my husband and myself privately. And obviously when a doctor says that to you, you know it's not going to be good news. So she takes myself and my husband into another room, and this is like, you know, those scenes from a movie where someone's getting bad news and everything just kind of slows down and goes silent, and they just are not retaining any information. Like that's what was happening to me. And she was explaining that from the MRI they could see that it was placenta that had been left in my uterus, and she said that it had grown through the wall of my uterus, and they call it placenta accreta. So I think there's like 3 stages of how bad it can be, and she said mine was the 2nd stage. So she said it's grown through the wall of your uterus, and like you risk it kind of invading in on your organs sort of thing. And she explained to us that what that means is they can't operate to get it out because it's too dangerous. Like you could just bleed out, your uterus could erupt. Like if they try to remove the placenta, there'll be too much blood. So she said the only certain way to fix it was to have a hysterectomy, which obviously means that they remove your whole uterus, which means that you can't have any more children. And, you know, hearing, like, I literally had just given birth to my first baby a month ago. I'm trying to enjoy him with all this crap going on, and then you get told, and you're probably never going to have a child again. So, and I mean, like, I could tell she was a lovely doctor and she was very emotional for me. She said, you know, obviously you're very young, we don't want to have to do that. So they said that they had called another hospital who had more specialized staff, and they were going to transfer me there and kind of leave me in the hands of them and hope that they can do something else for me. She said there was another option. I don't know if it was some sort of drug or like, she said it's kind of like a cancer treatment where it would hopefully kill off the placenta. She said that it's all experimental and the only certain way to sort of deal with it is to have the hysterectomy. So I got this news on a Friday night. She said I'd be getting transferred to that hospital. They had to do some blood matching, so I had some blood with me because she said with this condition you can basically just bleed out at any time. So they had to wait till they got a match for that, and then an ambulance came and transferred me to this other hospital, and then they said to me there's this special doctor that they wanted me to see wasn't going to be until Monday. So I had to wait from Friday till Monday with this news, Not knowing what was going to happen to me. And also, you know, I have a newborn. I'm constantly in hospital. He stayed with me a few nights, but the hospital kind of said he's not our patient, so we take no responsibility for him. He had to sleep in his pram next to me, like next to my hospital bed, and he spent some nights with my husband at home, which, you know, obviously as a new mum, is like, it's really hard to be away from your baby. So I got to the Monday and they did their own ultrasound, and from that she said to me, that's not what it is. So this great hospital where I had given birth had told me the worst case scenario, that is what's happening to me. I could possibly not have children again, and have sent me, thankfully, to this hospital who have said, we don't believe that's what it is. She said there is something still left in there, which is probably your placenta, but she goes, it hasn't grown through anything. They agreed that they didn't want to operate on it because something to do with the lining of my uterus was too thin, and it was just too risky to do that. So I was in hospital for, it was a while, it was a few weeks, and the doctors were all just constantly having meetings every day to try and sort of figure out what to do, and I don't think any of them really knew what, like, they hadn't seen it before. So on the last day when I was in hospital, the doctor came in and she said that they were going to let me go home, and she said that they're hoping that whatever is inside will come out naturally when I get my first cycle back. So I went home. I was still bleeding, and there was one day I was sitting on the couch and I started getting like intense contractions. Like, it was literally like I was about to give birth again, like I was going into labor. And I got up and I went to the toilet and I was bleeding, and there was, you know, clots and things coming out, and I was kind of screaming because I was in so much pain, and my husband's saying like, I don't know what to do. And then eventually I passed whatever it was that was left in there. And by this point I was so used to bleeding and clots, and, you know, every time I'd go to the doctor they would say, did you take photos, do you have a sample? And at first I thought, why would I do that? That's the last thing I want to do. But by this point I was so used to it, I had like samples of everything, and I took them back to the hospital so they could test them, and it ended up coming back as placental tissue. So the hospital where I had Luca had left my placenta, or part of my placenta, in my uterus, and I just, like, to this day all the doctors are still so shocked that that even happened. And you know, they all know that it's a horrible thing, and they all know that it shouldn't have happened, but to this day I haven't received an apology from that hospital. You know, I've obviously filed complaints and things, because for a long time after everything that happened, like, I couldn't even go into my bathroom. I would literally have like panic attacks. There was one time I was in the shower and I just had like the biggest anxiety attack, and I'm not someone who gets anxious or suffers from anxiety, but I couldn't breathe. I felt like I could see blood, and I felt like I was going crazy. And, you know, I told this to the hospital, and they don't take ownership for anything, and they still stand by the fact that apparently they did everything that they were supposed to do. Yeah, so that's my story. I feel good talking about it. Hopefully I didn't get too emotional. And now I feel like, you know, I also wanted to do this as kind of like a way to just sort of get it out and speak about it, finally take that weight off my shoulders. And now I feel like I can go into my next birth with a more positive and open mind. So thank you so much for listening. I know it's a pretty heavy video. You know, I'm sorry if there were bits in there that were a bit gross and hard to hear. But if you've gotten this far, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully I can continue making more videos. Thanks for listening. Say bye.